Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out what the future lies for smart buildings. If you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org on the members page. And just to point out that views expressed here on this show are personal and not of any company or organization. Just keep that in mind, and do post questions, comments on the Zoom chat. It's always better when it's interactive. And if you want anything on this slide deck, it is also available on mondaylive.org right there on the homepage. So it's great to have you with us today. So this being September, this is the third week, I think it is, that we are talking about buildings as assets. And our agenda, normal news and trends chit chat, and then we'll dive into buildings as an asset. And this week we're going to talk about TCO and where that plays into asset management. And hopefully we'll get some interesting discussion out of that. We do have a couple of guests that I'll bring on in due course. But before we do that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair. What's the news from Automated Buildings?
Okay, thank you very much. I was hoping to share our free education session at AHR, but it's taking a little longer to get it on the site. I think I should be good to get it next week. Worst case, the week after that. But it's coming together. We're just starting to piece together the speakers. So that's the update on our AHR. We've got on the screen there, we did a summary of last Monday's session under the ISO 55,000, I guess it is. And did kind of a summary of what we saw coming out of that session. And there's been good action on that as well. That was followed up by, I noticed this when I was hanging out on the web, or basically on social media, this webinar from the UK and new expectations in the standard for asset management. I've just been poking around it, haven't spent a lot of time on it, but it sounds like their heads are fairly close to where our heads are. So it's probably worthwhile taking a look at that and see what's going on, and possibly even attending that seminar. And then we've put the one from the week before, because this kind of all ties together with the building assets and of course our theme for September. So that's good stuff. Anto shared with us all a document from the System of Systems, and that's a link to it is there. I think it also ties in with what we're doing is a lot of what we have to create the standards around, and a lot of our asset value is how well we act as a system of systems. So I think that's an interesting twist, and we'll be trying to flesh that out a little bit more. And the last thing is we are a media partner with Smart Buildings in the UK. Interesting to see that there's like 4 or 5 of our sponsors are at that show. It looks like again, a direct hit on our industry, which brings up a whole pattern of this globalization that no matter what we're doing, somebody else in the world is probably doing a very similar thing. And it's certainly worthwhile for us to share our resources. And in fact, we can easily do that. And so we're really pleased to be part of this show. It looks like a really interesting show. They're expecting a couple of thousand folks. So, but again, very focused as we try to keep Automated Buildings focused, not so much on the quantity of people we touch, but the quality of people, or the people that actually understand where the industry is going. So back to you, Anto.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what subjects are discussed in that conference. I'm sure we'll get some reports back one way or the other.
For sure.
But I want to sort of bring up this system of systems paper that Ken mentioned. About 2-3 years ago, when I was spending quite a lot of time in Digital Twin Consortium, I was part of a group that decided to start this project, and it's taken all of this long to get it done. And really, it's obviously about system of systems and how to think about that. And really, the way to think about this is I would have mentioned a paper by IBM that was published back in 2010 on Monday Live. And that was a paper written by a couple of economists at IBM that basically says the whole world, which is what this diagram is representing, the GDP of the whole world is actually a system of systems, but we're not treating it, we're not managing it as a system of systems. And because of that, back in 2010, they calculated that it wasted $4 trillion that could have been saved. Could have been efficiencies could have been gained. So it's really sort of a really important paper. And in many ways, this paper answers that with this sort of model of thinking about how system of systems should be viewed on. And the key part of the paper to me is this table, which I have sort of made big here, and it's really sort of comparing what is the difference between a system and a system of systems. And this is actually right at the beginning of this work on this paper. This was kind of discussed at length. And if you think about this, and I always sort of think of it in terms of some example. So the best example that I can think of is that a system, an airplane is a system, right? Because an airplane, the composition of an airplane is predefined. It has 2 engines or 3 engines or 4 engines, and it's got doors and it's got all of the things. That is what a system is. And everything's all integrated. It is deterministic because that's what you want. You want the plane to behave in a very deterministic way. And it's constructed by a single entity, Boeing or Airbus. And it's continued like that throughout its life. So the capability of a system is predefined. Whereas the system of systems, the way to think about that is the composition is not predefined, it's organic. And the way to think about that in the analogy is to think of the airline system in the US as a system of systems, right? There is no predefined composition of all of the airports and all of the planes and airlines, right? It's organic, right? So you can add another city, you can add another airport, add another city, or add another airline, and everything will just work, which you can't do to an airplane. You can't just take an engine out of an airplane or add another one to make it better. It doesn't work that way. The system of systems does. The connection is interoperable. Completeness is non-deterministic, etc., etc. You can actually sort of see the difference here. This is really sort of important, and so I highly recommend you read this paper because it's really sort of goes into explaining all of this, and it actually has a number of use cases of how system of systems could be applied in smart cities, manufacturing, and other use cases. So highly recommend this. I'll put the link in chat in a minute once we get going. And so that's my bit. The link board as normal is here if you want any of the links on mondaylive.org. Any other things anybody want to bring up?
Yes, I have. Hi,
Go ahead, Kate.
so it was my pleasure to be with our colleague and friend Jim Lee, to meet with him last week at the Roosevelt Strategic Council Energy Summit. Very successful meetup. Jim and I were kind of like the 2 old timers on the end. So, 80 years of experience between the 2 of us or whatever. But something, Anto, that you mentioned, this system of systems approach, especially with the airplanes. Actually made an analogy of when I was booking my flight, when I came out flew out there out to Washington, D.C., where it was. I was on the United Airlines page, and I've made this analogy decades ago, right? So I didn't have a rental car because for some reason there was a lot of stuff going on in Washington, D.C. last week, and there were no rental cars available. But I conveniently looked around for rental cars on the United Airlines webpage. Now think about that. Those two companies, I guarantee you, those two companies' IT departments didn't get together and decide on and agree on some protocol or it was a casual interaction, arm's length. They didn't even talk to each other. Yet I was able to go and schedule my Hertz rental from the American Airlines website. And that just goes to show you, and I think Jim Lee might want to interject just real quickly, something along those lines, but we led with that. Like Jim and I just took it off, and it's like, we need to stop in the controls industry. Like there's well-defined systems of systems, as you elegantly put it, like other organizations and industries do this stuff kind of fine, and we're the only ones that mess it up. And
right. I just wanted to say thanks for getting me invited to that conference. I thought it was highly valuable and very interesting. And Keith did bring up that point, and I think it was well taken from the group that, especially when we look at some of the higher level system to system interactions that we've been looking at with the IBB and other things, that there are lighter weight ways to do system of system interactions, which are much more feasible than the past kinds of integrations we've had to do in the industry. So especially when we're dealing with less scale at the higher end for real pieces of value, I think this is absolutely the way forward. Thanks, Keith.
Any other thoughts before we move on? Hearing nothing. All right, let's get back to buildings as assets, and I'm going to bring Mike on as a panelist, and I'm also going to bring on our two guests. Dana is right here, and Anna is right here. Give me a moment. So they should all be on their way. There's Mike. And everybody's here. Okay, so we on Monday Live and the Coalition for Smarter Buildings have actually been talking about TCO for quite a while, and we actually talk about it in the context of what we call TXO, and we think about it as a scoreboard. This is kind of the sort of the image we want people to think about this whole sort of notion of TXO. And Rick, maybe you want to take it up, explain the thinking here.
Yeah, in this presentation, we kind of revealed it when we were at Realcomm, and we talked about the fact that now we actually have some systems that can be brought together in systems approach to be able to populate the data necessary to put on a scoreboard. And that was kind of a mouthful, but it's really been hard to. It's not been hard to imagine total cost of ownership. It's not been hard to manually compile what total cost of ownership is. But now we're getting to a point where you can automate the data flow to be able to, in more real time, populate, calculate, create KPIs. So we revealed this concept of TXO when we were in Realcomm. And the reason we didn't just go with total cost is because there's other things that the systems can help us realize, and calculating risk or benefits or value, and it's the list there. And that's the background of TXO. I'll say also, I've been following the work of our guests, and everything that they've done, which they're going to talk about, is sort of the bigger framework of a process and structure. And although we've never spoken in person, this is the first time we're on screens together, very confident that our concept of the tools and the scoreboard will fit in very nicely with what they're going to talk about relative to the processes and the standards and all of the complicated work.
Great, thanks. And the other thing you didn't mention, we changed the meaning of the O. Rather than ownership, we changed the O to operation, because we think the building is operated most of the time in its life. So it's actually more important than just owning it. So anyway, that's the view of this group. And with that, I'm going to ask Deke and Anna and Mike to talk about TCO from your perspective. I'm going to stop my share.
Well, I'm just going to introduce, and Deke Smith and Anna, there couldn't be better people to be talking about total cost of ownership, and so happy that they see it as hand in glove with asset management. I'm never sure which is the hand and which is the glove. It probably changes back and forth. But for you to start off by talking about systems of systems is perfect, because asset management is a system of systems. It is all of that complexity at the strategic level that leaders need to have some kind of handle on. And one of the best ways to have a handle on it is through costs. That's the way humans act. So Deke and Anna, if you want to. Well, Deke Smith has been involved in the building industry for a long time. He helped usher in the CAD standard for the United States, the BIM standard for the world. And if he's now focused on total cost of ownership, then he is, follow where that mind is looking. That's an important thing. And I haven't met Anna, but I know she is in close contact with Kimono Numa, who is a member of the Asset Leadership Network and has been on this program before. So if she's in close contact with Kimono, I know she gets it. And that's one of the most important things to do, is to be someone who gets it.
This is Deke. And I think that it's interesting. I was interested in hearing what you had to say about your total cost of operations. I think, well, first of all, it's all about data. I think we can all agree with that. And I agree with the system of systems aspect also, because my feeling is that an owner already has most of the data that they need. They have, but it's in other data sets. And, it might be in their maintenance data set, they might be in their personnel, might be in procurement, might be acquisition, all kinds of their asset database, obviously. And in fact, a lot of what Anna and I worked on with Doug Christensen, actually, he got it all started, and he kind of did a really strong test case at Brigham Young University, where he looked at how you apply TCO. And what we've been doing, about Anna and I, we were all co-chairs with Doug. Unfortunately, Doug passed away probably about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through part 1 of the APA standard that we developed. And so Anna and I kind of picked it up and carried it on, because we had been working with Doug for a good long time, and actually work now with his son also, Cameron Christensen. And so we're kind of pushing all of this. Why I got interested, I'd have to say, in TCO is I saw it as a metric for identifying the value of building information modeling, which had been where I've been working for a long time. And so I think, and that's, again, a lot of information is gathered during those phases. And in fact, as I look at it, during design, most of the decisions that are made during design hugely impact the operations, maintenance, renovation, renewal, all those kind of things of the facility from inception onward, as I always say. So I think that it's really the whole concept is to be able to get to a life cycle view. The industry is still, as you probably all are fairly aware of, is that the industry is very much still first cost oriented. And so what we're trying to do is, as we talk about BIM and we talk about things like that, those are all life cycle oriented aspects. And what we really have to do is get the industry to move towards that life cycle mindset, and to understand, like I say, that things that happen during design, during construction are going to affect operations and maintenance. And so all those things have to be connected, and interoperable and all the other good words that we use there, in order for this grand new thing to work. And we always talk about silos and things like that. We're very much in that orientation. Another group that I have is the Academic Interoperability Coalition, which we're looking and working with universities. We have about 85 universities that we are been working with the instructors in, whether it be in design, in construction, and real estate, all those folks, in trying to figure out, okay, how do we educate differently? So we have we've developed a body of knowledge and all that, and put a book out on that, on how do we educate differently so we can get something different happening. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, obviously we're going to get the same result. So we've got to start right at the beginning and start making some changes. So that's kind of a corollary that goes along with this. But I think in general, like I say, the key is capturing the data from the beginning and being able to use that and adding in metadata. That's the other piece that's hugely missing in most of what we do. We put a number in, or we put a value in, and then we don't know where it came from or what its purpose was or anything like that. Was a placeholder? Was it an actual, quote or something like that from a knowledgeable expert? So that's kind of where I've been looking at is, okay, how do we explain what TCO is to people, and then how do we help them figure out how to implement it? And it does. I mean, I don't have any disagreement with any of your items of your total cost, risk, benefit, value, all those things. I think those are all key elements. And I think that's, if I will, there's TCO, which involves all aspects of the asset. But I think the other piece that the owner looks at, and this is what kind of clouds the issue probably a lot of times, is that the owner is also looking at what is occupying his facility, his asset, whether it be people or whether it be an operation that happens, Ford Motor Plant or something like that. The thing is that there's so much more money involved in that aspect of it that the building almost becomes, is minimized in the program manager's mind. I won't say project manager, because the project manager is probably building the building. The program manager is the one that's looking at that bigger picture. And that's one of our problems if you look at from the C level of the organization. They're really interested in that. Why are we buying this? Why are we getting this new facility? And how much is that total investment in that new facility? And most of it's going to go into the people and operations that go into it. So, but we've got to do a better job on the total cost of ownership. What is it really going to cost that owner? And what can we do to try to improve that? How can we make it more effective? Because there's stuff out there that says, we waste as much as 50%. And there's all kinds of different numbers. NIST just put numbers out years ago, back in, I think it was 2014 or something. They put a report out, and all these things have been out there for a long time. We know there's waste. We have to figure out how to get it out of there. So that's where I'll kind of stop and turn it over to Anna, who's actually at Texas A&M. I'm sorry, University of Texas Austin. Oh, she'll shoot me. I have another friend that's at Texas A&M. But anyway, but Anna's at UT Austin, and she's really kind of boots on the ground and lives and breathes it every day too. So Anna.
Thank you, Deke. I don't know if we can be friends after that introduction. I'm just kidding. I've known Deke for many, many years, and we've worked well together. So yeah, I guess there's two main points I'd like to make about total cost of ownership. And one is, I think it all should begin with what is it that we're trying to accomplish, beginning with the end in mind. Like, what answers does an institution want to undertake or gain awareness of? I think that's by far the biggest thing I would drive home. So to me, it doesn't matter that you've changed some of the names compared to what we've published. As long as we're thinking about these things and understanding, every institution will have a different set of pain point and challenges at their organization or institution. And I think total cost ownership helps to answer a whole lot of questions. But I think an organization really needs to funnel and say, what is it that we want to address and what questions do we want answered from this data? And then to everyone's point, we have the data at the universities, at the institutions, it's there. Some can be more challenging, even at UT Austin, as big as we are. Those data mining points, it can be challenging to get. But I think if you understand what answer or what question you have, it really dictates what data you want to capture. With so many data elements, with so many pieces, I think that I really want to just drive that home. It's really important, I think, as we talk about that, the value of the amount of data needed for that decision. I think, we can collect 50 pieces of data, and if your question is only regarding 2 or 3 of those pieces, you've now collected 50 pieces of data and all this time and effort, and the value would have been if you had just collected these 3. So I think that's of utmost value as you're looking to do this effort. The other thing I'll just add on to what everyone's said is that total cost of ownership should be scalable. So Deke and I have always pitched that you should be able to do total cost of ownership for your organization or institution on the back of a napkin, and no, I'm not kidding, or with a very sophisticated BIM model, digital twin, COBE, all of that. So it should be scalable. So as you think about all of these pieces and managing your assets, know that I believe, and Deke as well, that this should be a scalable application for what you want to do. Of course, there are levels, and if you're using the back of a napkin, the accuracy and reliability of that is going to be much less than another more sophisticated, complex data approach. But I think it's important, as you may only need the back of a napkin approach to make some of these decisions. So just wanted to drive home those 2 points.
One of the things you mentioned, Anto, also was the idea of digital twins. And I think that, one of the things that I kind of look at too is that how do you get to a digital twin? And right now, the sad fact is that, we start out, we've got a building that we're looking at right now is we've got a BIM for design. We've got another BIM for construction. And now they're starting to create a BIM for a digital twin, as a digital twin, essentially. And the problem is each of those start from scratch, which is basically saying that's the way we've always done it. We've always kept all these things in the silos, as I mentioned earlier. But the question is, how do we get information to flow? Anna mentioned COBE. COBE is one of my favorite aspects, because that's the only example I know that goes all the way from design with the intent of delivering information to the owner, to the operator of the facility. And it's collecting data along the way. It collects data during design, it collects data during construction, during commissioning, and then turns it over at handover to the owner, and they can start using that data. Now, it's not a digital twin either, but it does kind of show that information can flow, and we've got to be able to demonstrate that and really make that happen in real life. Again, with total cost of ownership, My view of total cost of ownership is that as we're going through the design process and everything, we should be making design decisions with a life cycle point of view, so that those can then, so we know what the impact's going to be. We estimate those things up front, and then over time we're collecting information to say, well, this is what it's really costing as we go. And so we're basically doing asset related accounting, if you will. That you're, every time you spend money, it is focused at an asset. Now, you might have multiple accounting systems, to be able to do regular accounting and everything like that. But you also need to have an accounting system that's oriented towards your assets and captures information about each and every asset, each and every expenditure that you have towards that asset, whether it comes through the front office or whether it comes from a grant or whether it comes from a research or wherever. A lot of people are making changes and adding to that asset. You've got to be able to figure out how to capture all of those. And so it goes back to your interoperability point too, I think.
That's great. Thank you, Deke and Anna. Want to open it up to the floor here, the panel?
Absolutely.
Jim, Steve, were you gonna make a comment?
Well, I was clearing. I am getting ready to make a comment, but all of a sudden I had an urge to clear my throat. But I'll continue. So, I'm coming up tomorrow. I'm having my annual physical, and with my doctor, he always has me do a lab test. A few weeks before the physical, so he can go over the results and tell me how he thinks I'm doing. And I'm sure what I'm describing is pretty common to everybody on this call. And what I've learned is that that the particular lab test that he orders generates a dozen, maybe 20 different factors that they look at in my blood and that other bodily fluid that we don't want to describe. And more recently, I learned of a different lab group that does much more extensive evaluation of that same material, if you will, and generates over 100 biomarkers. And then they can zero down to individual organs in my body, my liver, my thyroid, you name it, right? And when I think about it in terms of the TXO, I view each one of those parts of my body as an example of a TXO. So the markers that are used for, say, the thyroid will tell me the health of the thyroid. And now I'm not expecting to get that kind of detail from my doctor tomorrow. He's largely going to tell me about my cholesterol and whether he sees maybe my triglycerides are too high, something like that. So it's going to be real basic stuff that you've probably heard about. So why am I bringing all this up? Because health of your body relates to this whole concept of total cost of ownership. Because if you had a good handle on health at that level, it's a strong indicator of how much it's going to cost to run your building, right? Or in this case, you're likely to have some significant health problems like a heart attack or a stroke in your future if your markers aren't what they should be, right? So similarly, if we're keeping good track of to your point, Deke, about the individual expenses we're paying for, say, a chill water system, and we get that data, that rolls up into the TCO calculation very naturally. But the question is, why are we having those expenses to begin with? And that points to the information that we're able to get, not from a blood test, but from the control system that's connected to that system. And we get to see how it's actually running or not being maintained properly based on real-time data. Okay. So now we can correlate the problem we're experiencing with unexpected expenses to the way it's actually running, much like the blood test tells me whether I'm got a potential problem, right? So I think there's a natural overlap, if you will, between the analogy I just brought up and this whole issue of TXO, also contributing to the financial discussion about TCO. Okay, so that's really the point I wanted to make, and I'm just using your annual blood test as an example that I think everybody can relate to.
But I think one of the aspects which brought to mind while you're explaining that, one of the aspects is of TCO really gets into talking about renewal and even renovation and some of those kinds of things, and end of life.
Right.
What kind of things do happen at the end of life of any system, and I guess if your knees start hurting, you can get a knee replacement. If your hip starts hurting, you can get a hip replacement. They can even replace your heart at this point. So, and lungs and all those kind of things. So it's kind of, but the point is that every system has a life to it also.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things that TCO really gets into. If you put something in cheap that's only going to last for 5 years, how much is that going to cost you versus putting in a more expensive item that's going to last you 15 years or 50 years or 70 years or whatever. And because the cost we know is also in replacing it. A lot of the cost is in replacing that part.
Right.
And so I think that's where TCO kind of gets into the whole picture and really becomes critical in looking at that again, the whole system, and what are all the impacts of all these different decisions you make. If you're only going to hold on to the building for 5 years, your asset for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, you probably don't have as much interest in holding on, as worrying about those parts. Again, with our bodies, hey, we want those to last for 100 years. And, so what are we going to do? And we eat right and things like that, so that we don't get premature failure on the systems, and like you say, with your cholesterol and things like that, we know that's causes problems, and so then the other part is kind of looking and trying to anticipate failure and correct things before they fail. Don't wait until you have a heart attack to go in and get a stent. Maybe figure out, hey, I need a stent before I get to that point. And so that's one of the things. I had another opportunity as I was deputy CIO at Army Research, and one of the things we were looking at there is trying to keep our systems up 100% of the time. So we had because we were supporting the warfighter and things like this, and we couldn't afford a failure. So we'd measure things like temperature and find out when a piece of equipment was operating at a higher temperature. It often indicated, especially rotating equipment, it often indicated there was getting close to failure. So we'd go in and actually replace something, or and that's where you have you'll have 3 pumps set up to be operating and simultaneously, and you can take one pump off the line, you can replace it and keep the others. The others can cover the stop and everything. So and that's the same thing. You take one kidney out, you still got another kidney that can continue to help you function. And so those kind of, I think all those things kind of, I like the body example. I think cars are also good examples. We have a lot of things that we really understand how that total picture really comes into play. But for some reason, with facilities, with assets, we don't seem to follow that for some reason, and I don't know why, and that's part of my frustration right now.
I'll just add one more point which is that the beauty of the, if you will, the body is that really with your blood and your urine, you get this wealth of information, and it's very straightforward, very quick to achieve, right? I wish this world of systems that we live in buildings was the same. Right? So it's not, and so much of what we're talking about here as Monday Live is what do we need to do to, if you will, revolutionize or evolve our world such that getting access to this data is, if you will, as easy as a blood test.
Yeah, I've got a facility that I'm working with right now, trying to create a laboratory where we stumbled across a building that's got over 6,000 sensors in it, and they've been collecting data every 15 minutes since it was opened in 2019. So we've got this huge, including the weather data. So we've got this huge amount of data, and what I'm trying to do is use AI kind of things and stuff like that to go through and say, okay, if we see, we back in 5 years ago, the temperature got up to 95 degrees, and all these pieces of equipment started cutting on, and it was costing us this much money. We hit the peaks on our utility bills and all those kind of things, and so if I had that model from the history, I should be able to go and apply that to the future. If I get another situation where it goes up 95 or 100 degrees or whatever, I can predict what pieces of equipment are going on. So if I can see what the slope is of getting to that high temperature, can I do some cutting back or leveling out some of the resourcing of the operations, cut off some equipment or whatever, and kind of minimize the peaks, because that's what we pay our utility bill on, is those peaks that we hit. And so how can I level some of that off a little bit and see if, again, playing some simulation games to be able to try to figure out how to make that, how to optimize that, I guess. So I haven't got very far on that one, but that's my hope, to be able to have some examples that we can start applying and showing how these things can actually change, how we can change.
My name's Jim Lee. I'm actually at Texas A&M today.
Oh,
I'm
good.
Boston, but they're at Mitchell Physics Building in Texas A&M right now, and Keith Gibson just pointed out to me that I went on a tirade at this conference last week, specifically on the topic of OpEx versus CapEx, and how in buildings there really is no OpEx, right? It's all about capital, and it's a project-based business. But many of us have been involved with the kinds of data businesses you just talked about. We've been at that kind of business for about the last 25 years, and we actually have pilots running with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Marines, and the Air Force at this point. The problem I have with the entire TXO concept is that I love it, but there's no muscle memory in this industry for people to use that data at higher levels in an organization, as that data hasn't really been here before. And I'd like you to expound, if you would, on how one provides change management in the C-suite or in those intermediate levels, so that we can attain escape velocity from the janitorial closet.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that I'd worked at ARL, but I worked for Naval Facilities, and I worked for Office of Secretary of Defense too, and managing all 580,000 assets for the Department of Defense. And one of the things we were doing is also I was one of the thread leads for the Business Center Enterprise Architecture, which we're trying to go through and be able to figure out how all these different things tie together. I was doing the installation and environment side, but I've come to believe that let me put it this way: at the installation level, and that's where I've also done a lot of trying to tie the installations together with folks like APA, because APA looks at the universities, and universities and installations are very similar. When you get up to the true sea level, if you will, in the Department of Defense, there's too many assets, too much stuff, too many politics, and so you've kind of got to drop down a level in order to be successful. And I think that's what we're finding. That's where a university, again, you get too big of a university, it gets more difficult, because again, there's a politics level. When and Army Research was an installation, or we were looking at several installations, but and what was critical in that is we had the director was totally on board with us implementing these concepts that we were putting into place. And the CIO was totally on board. And because of that, we were able to get a lot of stuff done. We had a 5-year plan that we finished in 3, and we demonstrated. We had somebody working with us. I don't know if are you familiar with Gartner? Their TCO is really well done in the IT industry. And I think we could take a lesson from Gartner and what they're doing. They have a huge database of every project that they've done a TCO study on, and you can then compare your organization against other organizations of the same type. So I could go in and compare what a cost per workstation was at different research facilities, and so I could or whatever type of facility type I was looking at. And I think we need somebody like that, somebody like Gartner, that's going to go in and capture some of that information. The Army Corps of Engineers did do some of that a while at Cyril, did do that quite a few years back, but and that's where Builder comes into play. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool or not, but that was kind of built some databases and stuff like that, but those are way out of date now.
So there are currently analytics programs going on at the Army Corps right now. And yes, across the military, we're looking at what is called enclaves. So you can imagine a system not across the DoD at large, but across a particular service, and basically doing centers of excellence and aggregating that data. Okay. So it is very similar to a university campus or a corporate multi-use site or multiple pharma campuses. It is all the same stuff, and we're out there. The problem that we run into is varying levels of interest and awareness at the next level up, right? You said that you had particular support in the projects you were working on. We don't always find that, because one of the things that this group has talked about at length is that facilities are often not considered core to the mission of what's going on. Therefore, they don't arise to a material level in the C-suite.
Well, that's what I was kind of referring. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I'm at UT, and so I can speak specifically to this. I've been here since 2009, and I've had various executive leadership, executive C-suite. You have different presidents, you have different CFOs. During that time, I think I've had 5 or 6 during that time span. And one thing I will share is that you have to understand the audience is one thing I think I will share. My CFO is an economist right now, so my slides, when I present to him, tailored towards that data and numbers. I have a president who's his background is business. So going back to what I said before, which is beginning with the end in mind, what are they trying to solve? What questions are they trying to solve? And I think when you start to tap into that and not just say, hey guys, we have TCO, it's so great. I haven't said those words for a really long time to my leadership or to anyone above that, because really what I'm doing is I'm using the total cost of ownership tool and principles and method to address the issues that they want solved. So we've had a couple of, let's call them events on campus that really raised awareness or lack of investment in our buildings that have high deferred maintenance, deferred capital investment. And so we've used those as an opportunity to make changes to say, hey, here's what's happened. How do we now not have this happen? Because the building that it happened in, I wouldn't have had it on any plan for 20 years. It's not my worst building. It's not my most aged building, but it had high humidity and a poor roof and poor windows and not great humidity controls on the HVAC. So you know where I'm going. So once we were able to use those as an examples and say, hey, here's one example of what can happen when we allow these to go, and then start to show graphs and data that support what they're trying to do, they're now completely bought in to what solutions that we can provide, even to the point that the president, as I sat in that office with him, he said, I'd really love for you to go look at EAC. And I wrote it down and I was like, all right, let me go back and look at this. So I go back and look at it. EAC is business terms for total cost of ownership. EAC is equivalent annual cost. And essentially what he was doing, it was, hey, can you go back and tell me what my equivalent annual cost is for my whole campus, for my whole buildings? When you start to come to them with solutions, then they start tapping into more. And without you even like saying, oh, they know what total cost of ownership is. When they start saying, hey, can you look at this? Can you tell me what this is? And you never even had to say anything about it. Like that's, I feel like when we get to that point of it's beauty, right? They now have bought in without you really even going like, here's what total cost of ownership is, right? They already get it and they want you to be a part of the solution because you understand what their problem is and you have some tools to get there. And I will just share with you, we don't have BIM, we don't have 3D models. We barely have Revit files for some of our buildings. And when I say we don't have BIM, I don't have a big, massive program where we have digital files, and you'd think that we would at UT Austin. They design and construct BIM all day long here, and we get those models, but it's not anywhere in a state that we can use it. So the data that we have, I'm doing the best that I can with the data that I have. So Jim, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much.
And I think you've said, Anna, also, one of the problems is just getting connectivity between different databases that you have at the school. Connecting up with your accounting or your personnel or any your IWIM systems and things like that. Getting those connections are difficult. Right?
Yeah, connections are difficult. And then, I'm learning as we're piecing together and I'm trying to say like, here's your worst 30 buildings on campus. Because I don't have the luxury of saying my top 10. We have too many that are old, right? So just getting down to the top 30 and trying to filter that down. I've got 89 buildings that have roofs on them that are past their useful life. 27 of those leak during a rainstorm, right? So we've got issues on roofs. HVACs are kind of in the same boat. I have 60-year-old HVACs on campus, and I have more than 10. That's all I'll tell you. More than 10 of those on campus. So, yeah, it's risk, not right? Happening here.
Talk about risk, right?
Right. But so I'm trying to figure out like, how do I siphon down the data to tell them which one I think is going to fail first. And, to Deke's point, it's like, well, I don't really have access to the data. But what I found is like, okay, I know the age of systems, know when they were installed. I've got a bunch of them that are past due. Now what? Now how do I get to how am I going to guess? Like I said, the one that we had issues with wasn't even on my 20-year plan. We just did that air handler replacement in 2012. Did it poorly, but we did it. So it just comes down to piecing together what you do have and doing the best with what you can. And Deke, you're right. Like I don't have 3D BIM models and all of these fancy things. I don't have access to data, but what I do have access to, I think the biggest thing I'll share with you is my relationships with other organizations outside of just facilities has helped tremendously. So, and I would say some of you might consider them to be in facilities, but like your environmental health and safety group, having ITS group, there's Wi-Fi data that you can tap into. I feel like as I've had those relationships, we've sort of investigated how to start to get some of that data to like figure out what is our worst building on campus. And then taking it to the next level, which is, I've got the science, I've got the data, I can tell you where the bad buildings are, I can tell you the old ones. But now I need the art piece, which is which ones are important to the president, which ones are important to a researcher, which ones can't be shut down. There's data and science element into that, right? I had on my list a very important lab that was leaking. It holds very special equipment, I won't tell you. And I had it on the list to get fixed. And the provost and president, they were like, yeah, we don't care about that. And I was like, wait, what? So had I not shown them that, I would never have known that that was not important to them because of X, Y, and Z was happening. So I think there's also the art side of it, that if you can come to them with the data that you do have, they're more willing to engage with you on the art piece, which is how can they help couple their thoughts and feelings and things that are harder to quantify with it. Yeah, I had never heard of EAC either. It's apparently a real estate term.
Yeah, I just came across it the other day too, and I'm we're putting Anna and I are putting together a series of 3 papers for APA, their facility manager magazine, and what I'm looking at is how all these different pieces to fit together, like LCCA and cost models and all kind of things like that. So hopefully we'll have something together in the next couple of months along those lines. But I think that's the key element to is what, different people are looking at different things, just like you're saying CXO. The financial people have a whole set of language that they're using, and so we have to all be kind of speaking in the same language, or at least be able to relate the different pieces together in order to be successful.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, Anna. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, so this is great. Hanno or Mark, do you want to do a bit of a recap as we close out?
You're mute, Mark, so I'll take over. I think the big takeaway that I heard from Anna today, right, is obviously what she's doing requires a lot of subject matter expert, right? She's obviously knows the space and has been able to take the data from the buildings that she's got as whatever the quality of that data is, right? And going back to Steve's analogy on the medical side, Steve, what those labs can do today wasn't available 10 years ago, right? Because the software, the capabilities wasn't there back in that time. So the medical field, of course, the science and the technologies to be able to look at your blood and do the prediction stuff, we're not there, to be honest, guys. I don't see, what Anna's been able to do has not been transitioned into the sort of software solutions that I see out there, right? I mean, we're good at FTD and, some analytics and some, but the holy grail that everybody wants is the predictive capability that Anna was describing, right? Given all this data and my buildings and which buildings did this, she's in that precarious position of she has to take all that and make a prediction to the board to say, yes, this roof on this building in 3 months' time or 2 years' time is going to need attention. That's not a trivial job. And doing that with software today, we're not even close to that space in our industry. We can collect the data, we can do some interesting analytics, and we can do, but to Jim's point always, we're positioning our propositions to the facility guy who doesn't care. And what Anna was saying is, no, put it in a language with predictive capabilities to this level, you'll get their attention.
Do you see why I wanted Deke and Anna to join for total cost of ownership? Because what I'm trying to get this group to do is understand that you can get your hands around asset management, and you can bring what you are doing is asset management, and you are closer to the ideal, then you realize with the information that they're not extracting from you already, Anna could tell them which routes to fix. And by doing these workshops that we're planning for AHR in February and the lead ups, we're going to be helping you become confident that you can pick an owner and go with us to that owner and deliver that message that Anna was talking about at that C-suite. The reason why Kimono Numa, who was talking with you, is working with Anna is because he's bringing that information from people like you. He's coalescing it, bringing it together and presenting it. He needs the input of people like you. And by focusing on your critical building system area that this group focuses on, I think we are the ones that are going to make the breakthrough.
Thank you, Mike. And I think that's a nice wrap up for this. We're well past time. We'll get the video up tomorrow or Wednesday. And all that leaves me to say is hope everybody has a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
Anto and Ano, can you guys stay on for just a minute?
Yeah, I got a minute.
Thanks, Deke.
Bye now.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take care.
Deke.